This story is titled, "My Parents Coldly Texted Me, Stop Showing Up Here." So I replied, "Then I'll stop sponsoring your apartment." Now they can't cover their loan payments and are begging for forgiveness and financial help. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 29 years old. For 5 years, I paid my parents' mortgage after my dad wrecked his back in a construction accident. When I finally told them I couldn't keep covering the full amount anymore, their response was brutal. "Then don't bother coming around anymore. We don't want to see your face." After that devastating conversation, they started spreading lies about me and tried turning everyone in our family against me. Here's the full story of how it all went down. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, where my parents owned a decent-sized house with a mortgage they could barely afford on their best days. My dad, Kevin, is 58 and worked construction his entire adult life, while my mom, Linda, who's 54, bounced between various part-time jobs throughout my childhood. She had a pattern of quitting whenever the work became too stressful or demanding, which happened more often than not. From a very young age, I knew money was always tight in our household. My parents never missed a single opportunity to remind me just how expensive I was to raise, turning my childhood into what I can only describe as a masterclass in guilt and financial anxiety. Every trip to Walmart for basic school supplies became a full-blown financial crisis in our house. God forbid I needed new shoes because I had outgrown the old ones. You'd think I was asking them to buy me a car. What made this even more frustrating was the complete hypocrisy I witnessed. The same month my parents told me they couldn't afford my $180 soccer camp fee, they went out and bought a massive 70-inch television and completely new living room furniture. Meanwhile, I'm being made to feel guilty for needing basic school supplies and athletic opportunities that most of my friends' parents provided without a second thought. When I started showing real talent for marketing and design during high school, my parents actively discouraged it as completely impractical. "Marketing people starve," my dad would say dismissively, while literally dropping $350 on fishing gear that he used maybe twice before it gathered dust in the garage. Despite their discouragement, I decided to pursue my passion anyway, working after school at the local copy center just to buy my own design supplies and software. The owner of the copy center quickly noticed my promotional designs and started letting me create flyers and marketing materials for local businesses. This was my first real taste of making actual money from what I loved doing, and it felt incredible to see my hobby turning into something profitable. I'll never forget one particular Saturday when my dad caught me working on a campaign layout for a local restaurant instead of cleaning the garage like he had asked. He stood in my doorway with his arms crossed, giving me that familiar, disappointed look, and launched into his usual speech about priorities. "That advertising crap won't pay the bills, son," he said with that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. "You need to focus on real responsibilities." 2 weeks later, I received a $90 check for that exact campaign from the restaurant owner who was thrilled with the results. I made sure to leave that check on the kitchen counter where my dad would definitely see it, hoping it might change his perspective even slightly. He never mentioned it, not once. The evidence of my success was right there in front of him, but he chose to ignore it completely rather than admit he might have been wrong. My mom was marginally better than my dad, but honestly not by much. She would occasionally acknowledge my talent, but it always came wrapped in backhanded compliments that somehow made me feel worse than outright criticism. "That's lovely, dear," she'd say while barely glancing at my work. "Maybe you can do this on weekends after you get a real job in accounting or something stable." This was particularly rich coming from someone who collected those expensive Precious Moments figurines as a hobby, spending hundreds of dollars on tiny ceramic sculptures, but somehow couldn't understand why someone would actually pay good money for professional marketing services. After graduating high school, I made the decision to put myself through a state college marketing program. Those 4 years were absolutely brutal. I worked nights at the copy center while taking full course loads during the day. My roommate's parents bought all his textbooks and supplies without him even asking, while mine would send me links to scholarship applications that were inevitably 2 weeks past their deadlines. The contrast was painfully obvious and constantly reminded me of how different our family situations were. My parents contributed exactly $0 to my college education. They had completely blown what little college fund they'd managed to save on a bathroom remodel the year before I graduated high school. Their priorities were crystal clear, and my education wasn't one of them. They didn't even help me move into my dorm room, while my roommate's parents bought us a microwave and helped us set up our room. Mine were texting me asking when I'd be sending my first check home to help with household expenses. I wasn't even unpacked yet, and they were already expecting me to contribute financially to their lives. The college years were absolutely brutal, but they were incredibly educational in ways that went far beyond marketing theory. I wasn't just learning about advertising and brand strategy, I was getting a masterclass in self-reliance and determination. I learned how to network effectively, something that came naturally out of necessity when you don't have family connections to rely on. I hustled relentlessly for internships that my better-connected classmates didn't even need to apply for because their parents knew someone who knew someone. While most of my peers were enjoying the full college experience, attending basketball games, joining fraternities, and having the luxury of focusing solely on their studies, I was building a professional portfolio and working side jobs to survive. I spent countless evenings designing menus for local restaurants at $18 an hour. It wasn't great money by any stretch, but it was better than nothing, and every dollar I earned was a dollar I didn't have to borrow or beg for. By the time I turned 25, I had successfully established myself as a freelance marketing consultant in Dallas. The move to Texas was strategic. The market was growing, and I saw opportunities that weren't available back in Ohio. I had built a solid client base consisting primarily of small businesses and startups who appreciated quality work at reasonable rates. I was making decent money, though I lived extremely frugally in a one-bedroom apartment in Deep Ellum to keep my overhead low. My apartment was furnished almost entirely with IKEA furniture and a second-hand desk I'd found on Craigslist, but I made sure to invest in professional-grade design equipment and software. My priorities were clear. I could live with cheap furniture, but I couldn't compromise on the tools that directly impacted my ability to serve clients and grow my business. During this time, I was dating Diana, who's 28 and works as a project manager for a tech company. I had met her through one of my clients, and she was exactly the kind of person I needed in my life. She was smart, understood the demands of my work, and didn't mind that I sometimes had to pull all-nighters to meet important deadlines. Life was genuinely looking up for the first time in years. I was even secretly saving money for an engagement ring, though I kept that information completely to myself because I wanted the proposal to be a surprise. Then came the phone call that would completely change the trajectory of my life. My dad had fallen from a ladder while attempting to fix the roof of their house. The fall had shattered his leg in 3 places and caused fractures in his spine. The doctor delivered devastating news. He would never be able to work construction again. This was catastrophic for my family because my dad had no disability insurance, minimal health coverage, and they were already struggling to make their mortgage payments even when he was working full-time. The situation became clear immediately. They had no safety nets in place whatsoever. Because why would you plan for emergencies when you can just rely on your kids to bail you out, right? The call came from my mom, and I could hear the desperation mixed with her usual manipulative undertones. "We need your help, son," she said, adding what sounded like fake sobbing for dramatic effect. "Just until your father gets back on his feet and can find something else to do." That night, sitting in my small apartment in Dallas, I made what would turn out to be the worst financial decision of my entire life. I agreed to cover their $1,950 monthly mortgage payment temporarily, while my dad recovered from his injuries. I wasn't completely naive, though. Instead of just sending them cash that could disappear into who knows what expenses, I set up a direct payment arrangement with their mortgage company. At least that way I could be certain the money was actually going toward keeping their house, and not toward my mom's shopping habits or my dad's impulse purchases. What I thought would be a temporary arrangement to help family during a genuine crisis turned into 5 years of financial servitude. 5 long years during which my father never once seriously looked for work that he could physically handle from a desk or office setting. Instead, he spent his days camped out in front of the television, watching cable news programs and complaining endlessly about immigrants supposedly taking all the available jobs. The irony was completely lost on him. He would simultaneously claim that there were no decent jobs out there for someone with his skills, while making absolutely zero effort to actually find or apply for any positions that might work with his physical limitations. Meanwhile, my mom decided to quit her receptionist job entirely, claiming that the stress of working was negatively impacting her ability to properly care for my father. This care primarily consisted of bringing him snacks while he watched TV for 8 hours a day and driving him to physical therapy appointments twice a month. She used her newfound abundance of free time to redecorate the house that I was paying for, spending money on new curtains, throw pillows, and decorative items while posting inspirational quotes on Facebook about how life's challenges make us stronger. The situation with my sister Brittany, who was 19 at the time, was equally frustrating. She lived at home completely rent-free, taking what she called gap years, but what looked more like permanent vacation from any form of responsibility. Despite having no job and no apparent source of income, she somehow managed to afford posting Instagram photos from trendy coffee shops and music festivals around the city. Her bedroom was filled with expensive Urban Outfitters decor and high-end makeup that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Whenever I brought up the possibility of Brittany getting a job to contribute to the household, my mom would immediately jump to her defense with the same tired excuses. "She's finding herself," Mom would say with complete sincerity. "Not everyone knows exactly what they want to do at her age, and we don't want to pressure her into something she'll regret." This was particularly galling to me because I knew exactly what I wanted at her age: financial independence and the ability to build my own life without being a burden on anyone else. But apparently, having goals and work ethic was just my particular quirk rather than normal adult behavior. Meanwhile, I was putting my entire life on hold to support their lifestyle. Diana and I couldn't even think about buying a place of our own because such a massive chunk of my income was going directly to Ohio every month. Our vacation plans were limited to weekend trips to San Antonio or the beaches around Galveston. Definitely not the European tour we had talked about taking together. My marketing business remained a one-man operation because I simply couldn't afford to hire additional help or rent proper office space when I was hemorrhaging nearly $2,000 every single month. The financial reality was crushing. Every month, $1,950 went straight from my checking account to their mortgage company before I could even think about my own expenses or future plans. That's $23,400 per year after taxes. Essentially, a third of my entire income just vanishing to support people who had actively discouraged my career and never contributed a penny to my education or early struggles. I had to structure these payments very carefully for tax purposes, which added another layer of complexity and stress to the entire arrangement. Since I was paying over $23,000 annually directly to their mortgage company, my accountant had to help me document everything properly as either gifts that fell below the annual gift tax exclusion limits or as formal loan payments with proper documentation to protect me from IRS scrutiny. The last thing I needed was the government questioning why I was transferring this much money every year to people who weren't my dependents. Of course, my mom and dad never once considered the tax implications their dependency was creating for me. That was just another example of how completely one-sided this entire arrangement had become. Whenever I even hinted at the possibility of reducing my support, the guilt trip would begin immediately. "We raised you for 18 years, they would say, or "Family is supposed to help family when times get tough." The irony of them saying this while simultaneously having spent my entire childhood criticizing my career choices and calling my work advertising crap wasn't lost on me. My dad actually introduced me at a family gathering once as my son who draws ads for a living, while I was literally paying his mortgage every month to keep a roof over his head. I tried setting clear boundaries early in the arrangement, hoping to prevent exactly this kind of mission creep. 6 months, I had said initially, just until Dad can find something else he's physically capable of doing. But 6 months became a year, then 2 years, then 3 years, and every time I tried to have the conversation about reducing support or setting an end date, there was suddenly a new crisis that required my continued financial assistance. The water heater broke and needed replacement. The car needed expensive repairs. Or Brittany needed money for community college classes that she would inevitably drop within the first month. Diana saw what was happening to me long before I was willing to admit it to myself. "They're using you," she said bluntly, after one particularly frustrating phone call where my mom had hinted that they really needed a new refrigerator since theirs was making strange noises. "They have absolutely no intention of becoming financially independent again. Why would they? You've made it so they don't have to." I defended them at first, the way people do when they're not ready to face uncomfortable truths about their family. "They're still adjusting to Dad's limitations," I would say. His injury was really serious, and it takes time to figure out new career paths at his age. But Diana wasn't buying my excuses, and she had the receipts to back up her concerns. "It's been 3 years, Marcus," she pointed out, "and he's playing golf now. I saw the photos on your mom's Facebook page. That observation hit me like a physical blow. My dad claimed he was in too much pain to work any kind of desk job or find alternative employment, but apparently 18 holes at the public golf course was perfectly manageable on a regular basis. When I finally worked up the courage to ask him about this contradiction, he just shrugged it off with typical dismissiveness. "Doctor says I need to stay active," he said. "Golf is therapeutic for my back problems." Therapeutic? Right. Funny how his therapy never seemed to include job applications or career counseling. Last October, I joined our bi-weekly family video call from my apartment, a ritual that had become nothing short of psychological torture. These calls followed the same exhausting pattern every single time. An hour of listening to their endless problems, Brittany's entitled whining about whatever she felt she deserved that week, and thinly veiled requests for additional money beyond the mortgage payment I was already covering. This particular call was different, though, because I actually had genuinely exciting news to share. I had just landed a major client, a promising tech startup that wanted a complete marketing package from brand development to digital strategy. This project would require all of my time and attention for 4 months straight, but the payout would be absolutely substantial. We're talking 6 figures here, the kind of contract that could completely transform my one-man operation into a legitimate marketing agency with real employees and proper office space. "That's great, honey," my mom said dismissively, barely looking up from scrolling through her phone while I tried to explain the significance of this opportunity. "Now about Thanksgiving. We're thinking of having everyone over at the house this year, and I already started planning the menu." I could see she hadn't absorbed a single word about my career breakthrough. "Actually," I said, trying to redirect the conversation back to something that mattered, "I might not be able to make it for Thanksgiving this year. This project is huge and the deadline is extremely tight. I really need to focus if I want to deliver the quality of work that could lead to even bigger opportunities." The silence that followed was immediate and uncomfortable. My dad looked up from his own phone with a scowl that I recognized from childhood, the same expression he used to give me when I asked for money for school activities. "You're seriously considering skipping Thanksgiving?" he asked, his voice already taking on that dangerous edge that meant an argument was brewing. My mom's voice had shifted to that particular tone that every adult child recognizes as trouble. "After we already told everyone in the family that you'd be here," she said. "We've been planning this for weeks, and people are expecting to see you." "I didn't agree to any plans," I pointed out, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "And honestly, I need to focus on this project because it could be absolutely game-changing for my business. This is the kind of opportunity I've been working toward for years." "Your little marketing hobby isn't more important than family," my dad muttered, not even bothering to look up from his phone while delivering this particular insult. After 5 years of paying his mortgage, he was still calling my career a hobby. "It's not a hobby," I replied, feeling my patience wearing dangerously thin. "It's my career, the same career that pays your mortgage every single month." That's when Brittany's face appeared on the screen, and I could immediately tell from her expression that she was about to make this conversation even worse. "Wait, does this mean you won't be buying me a new laptop for Thanksgiving?" she asked, as if expensive electronics were some kind of traditional holiday gift that I was obligated to provide. "I wasn't planning to buy you a laptop," I said, genuinely confused about where this expectation had come from. "When did I ever say I would do that?" "But I need it for school," she protested, with the kind of indignant tone that suggested I was being completely unreasonable. It turned out that Brittany had finally enrolled in community college classes just 3 weeks earlier, after spending 2 full years doing absolutely nothing productive with her life. She was taking exactly 2 classes, both of them online, and according to my mom's most recent update, she was already failing both of them spectacularly. "You can use the perfectly good laptop you already have," I suggested, referring to the 3-year-old machine that was still more than adequate for basic schoolwork and online classes. "That thing is 3 years old," she said, as if I had suggested she use a typewriter. "Everyone in my class has the new MacBook Pro. I can't be the only one with old technology. It's embarrassing." I tried desperately to redirect the conversation back to the actual issue I needed to discuss with them. "Look, I really need to talk about the mortgage payments," I said, knowing this wasn't going to go well, but needing to address it anyway. "With this big project coming up, I'll be investing in some new equipment and software to handle the increased workload properly. I might need to reduce the mortgage payments for just a few months while I make these business investments." The atmosphere in the video call instantly froze. You would have thought I had suggested selling their organs on the black market based on the horrified expressions on their faces. This wasn't even me saying I wanted to stop the payments entirely. Just reduce them temporarily so I could invest in growing my business. "Reduce the payments?" My mom's voice had turned to ice, and I could see the fury building in her eyes. After we just told Brittany she could quit her part-time job to focus on her schoolwork? This was news to me. Apparently, they had been making financial decisions based on my continued support without even consulting me about it. That was your decision, not mine, I said, feeling my patience finally starting to crack after years of this treatment. I've been paying your mortgage for 5 years now. This was never supposed to be a permanent arrangement, and I need to invest in my business if I want it to grow. That's when my dad jumped into the conversation with both feet. We gave you life, he said, his voice rising with indignation. We put a roof over your head for 18 years, fed you, clothed you, and raised you to be the man you are today. That's what parents are supposed to do, I replied, my voice getting sharper than I intended. That's called basic parenting, not some kind of loan that I'm expected to pay back for the rest of my life. Meanwhile, I've been putting a roof over your heads for 5 years as a grown adult, and I'm not even asking you to pay me back, just to eventually become independent again. That was the moment my mom completely snapped. Her face went red, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with a venom I had never heard directed at me before. We don't want to see your face anymore if you can't be bothered to support your family, she said, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. Then don't bother coming for Thanksgiving or Christmas or any other family gathering for that matter. Before I could even respond or try to explain that I wasn't abandoning them, just asking for a temporary adjustment, she had disconnected the call. I sat there in complete shock, staring at my laptop screen that now showed nothing but my own reflection. 5 years of sending them $1,950 every single month without fail, without complaint, without ever being late on a payment. 5 years of sacrificing my own financial goals, my relationship milestones with Diana, and my business growth. And this was what I got for suggesting a temporary reduction, not even stopping the payments entirely, just reducing them for a few months while I invested in equipment that could help me earn more money in the long run. I immediately grabbed my phone and texted my mom, hoping to salvage the situation and explain my position more clearly. The message bounced back. She had already blocked my number. I called my dad's phone and it went straight to voicemail without even ringing. Within 10 minutes of that conversation ending, Brittany had posted on Instagram with a message that was clearly directed at me. Some people show their true colors when money's involved. Blood doesn't always mean family. She had tagged it with hashtags like #toxic and #narcissist, which was incredibly rich coming from someone who had never paid for anything in her entire life and was currently demanding a new MacBook Pro that cost more than most people make in a month. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't have a dramatic breakdown. Instead, I felt this weird, cold clarity settle over me like fog lifting from a landscape I had never been able to see clearly before. For the first time in 5 years, the crushing weight of guilt that had been pressing down on my shoulders every day was gone. I could see the situation for exactly what it was: financial manipulation wrapped in family obligation. I typed one final message to the family group chat before they could block me from that too. Then you'll never see my money again, effective immediately. After hitting send, I immediately went into my banking app and canceled the automatic mortgage payment that was scheduled to go through the following week. 5 years of financial servitude ended with just a few taps on my phone screen. Diana came over that evening and brought me a beer, and we ordered Chinese food to celebrate what felt like the end of a nightmare. It was surreal how good it felt, like dropping a 250-pound backpack that I'd been carrying everywhere for years without realizing how much it was weighing me down. That night, I slept better than I had in months. When my alarm went off the next morning, I actually felt energized for the first time in years. I walked to my home office, sat down at my desk, and pulled up my financial spreadsheets to see the real impact of this decision. Without that $1,950 mortgage payment disappearing from my account every month, I could actually afford to hire a junior consultant to help with client work. I could even start looking at renting a small office space instead of working out of my apartment. The possibilities that had been completely out of reach for 5 years were suddenly within my grasp again. Diana called around noon to check on how I was handling everything. "How are you feeling?" she asked cautiously, probably expecting me to be having second thoughts or feeling guilty about my decision. "Liberated," I replied without hesitation, and I meant every word of it. 3 days passed with complete radio silence from my family, which was honestly a relief after years of constant guilt trips and financial demands. On the 4th day, however, the calls started coming in, but not from numbers I recognized. They were calling from neighbors' phones, church friends' numbers, and distant relatives whose phones they had borrowed. since I had blocked all of their personal numbers. The mortgage payment didn't go through, my dad's voice message said, and I could hear the barely controlled anger in his tone. Fix it immediately, and we'll discuss your attitude problem when you come to your senses. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how they had treated me, no recognition that maybe they had crossed a line. Just the automatic expectation that the money would keep flowing like I was some kind of ATM with an attitude problem. Then came a message from Brittany, her voice dripping with the same entitlement that had characterized her entire adult life. Dad's completely freaking out about the mortgage situation, she said. You need to fix whatever temper tantrum you're having before you ruin everything for everyone. Also, I still need that laptop before my classes get more serious. I deleted the message without responding. She was calling my decision to stop enabling their lifestyle a temper tantrum. This was after I had supported them financially for 5 years without a single complaint, and they had told me not to come around anymore simply because I suggested a temporary reduction in payments. About a week after I had cut them off completely, my phone lit up with a text from yet another number I didn't recognize. We need to talk. It's your father, the message read. I decided to call back, curious to see if his tone had changed now that the reality of their financial situation was setting in. What do you want? I asked when he answered, keeping my voice neutral but not warm. We're being evicted next week, he said, and for the first time in years, his voice was completely devoid of the usual authority and condescension. Your Uncle Daniel won't take us in, and no one else in the family will either. Brittany's staying with a friend from work, but she can't keep her there long term. We literally have nowhere to go. That sounds like a personal problem, I replied, surprised at how little emotion I felt hearing about their crisis. After 5 years of my own sacrifices being dismissed and my career being called a hobby, I found I had very little sympathy left. Son, please, he said, and I could hear genuine desperation creeping into his voice for the first time in this entire 5-year ordeal. We're absolutely desperate here. We don't know what we're going to do. You said you didn't want to see my face anymore, so I took that statement both literally and financially, I replied, feeling a strange sense of calm as I laid out exactly what was going to happen next. But anyway, here's what's going to happen if you want any help from me at all. The plan was forming in my mind as I spoke, and I realized I had been thinking about this moment for longer than I cared to admit. You and Mom are going to write a formal, detailed apology acknowledging everything. The 5 years of financial support I provided, the lies you've been spreading about me to the family, and the family events you've excluded me from after I mentioned reducing payments. You're going to send that apology to every single person you've been talking to about this situation. Marcus, be reasonable here, he started to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. I'm not done talking, I said firmly. Once that apology is sent and I've verified that people actually received it, I'll consider, and I stress the word consider, helping you find a small apartment somewhere. Not paying for it indefinitely like I did with the house, just helping with the security deposit and first month's rent to get you started. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, probably realizing that his years of easy money were truly over. You'll both need to get real jobs, actual full-time employment, not your part-time experimenting or Mom's Etsy shop fantasies. Real jobs with real paychecks that can actually support you both. And what about Brittany? He asked quietly, probably knowing he wasn't going to like my answer. Brittany called me an asshole to my face during our last conversation and has been posting lies about me on social media for months, I said, thinking about all those passive-aggressive Instagram posts with their hashtags about toxic family members. She gets absolutely nothing from me. She's an adult who can figure out her own housing situation. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear him calculating whether he had any other options. Those are my terms, I continued. Take them or leave them, but you have exactly 24 hours to decide. Your mother isn't going to like these conditions, he said finally, which was probably an understatement of epic proportions. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. You have 24 hours to let me know your decision. Before hanging up, I mentioned that I had briefly considered consulting with my lawyer about whether I might have any equity claim on their house after directly paying the mortgage for 5 years. Since I had been paying into the property directly rather than just giving them cash, there was potentially a legal argument to be made. My lawyer had explained that I could possibly make a case, but pursuing it would mean staying entangled with them through a lengthy and expensive legal process. Ultimately, I decided that the freedom of cutting ties completely was worth far more than whatever fraction of their house equity I might eventually recover through the courts. Clean breaks don't come with strings attached, and I wanted to be completely done with this chapter of my life. The next day, I received an email from both of my parents with the subject line, "Our apology." Attached was a letter that hit every single point I had demanded, acknowledging the 5 years of mortgage payments, their treatment of me, and the lies they had spread to family members. They had already forwarded copies to our extended family and their church group. It was clearly written through gritted teeth. I could practically feel their resentment radiating through the carefully chosen words, but it covered everything I had asked for. I immediately forwarded the apology to my Uncle Daniel with a simple message: verification needed. He called me within an hour, and I could hear a mixture of surprise and respect in his voice. "They actually did it," he confirmed, sounding genuinely impressed. "Your mom was crying at church yesterday while admitting everything to the congregation. Your dad has applied for full-time positions at 5 different places just this week. It's like they finally hit rock bottom and realized they had to change." "Rock bottom is where real change happens," I said, remembering something my first marketing mentor had told me years ago when I was struggling to find clients and build my business. Sometimes you need to lose everything to realize what you actually need versus what you just want. I kept my word exactly as I had promised. I helped them find a small 2-bedroom apartment in a decent enough area of town. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe with reasonable rent that 2 working adults could actually afford on their own. I paid the security deposit and first month's rent as agreed, making it absolutely clear that this was a one-time gesture and not a return to the old arrangement where I was their personal ATM. My lawyer drafted a properly structured gift agreement that both of my parents had to sign before I would release any money. The document acknowledged that this was a one-time payment with no expectation whatsoever of future financial support from me. The agreement stated in plain English that any future claims that I had promised ongoing support, whether verbally, online, or through relatives, would trigger full repayment of this gift with interest. My lawyer called it the No BS clause, and it was designed to prevent exactly the kind of manipulation they had used on me for 5 years. On the day my parents finally moved out of their foreclosed house, Brittany sent me a text that perfectly encapsulated her complete lack of self-awareness. "Happy now?" she wrote. "We're living in a crappy apartment because of you." I replied with a single screenshot showing exactly $137,250 in mortgage payments I had made over the past 5 years. Every single transaction documented and categorized. She didn't respond to that message. 1 year later, my life has completely transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined when I was trapped in that cycle of financial servitude. My marketing studio has grown to a team of 5 talented professionals, and we've moved into a larger office space downtown with actual conference rooms and a proper creative workspace. Diana and I bought a beautiful condo with a view of the river, and we're actively planning a wedding in Costa Rica next spring. No family members will be invited to that celebration. My dad now works full-time at a hardware store, which turns out to be something he's actually quite good at when he applies himself. My mom found a job as a receptionist, ironically, the exact same type of position she had quit years ago because she claimed it was too stressful for her delicate constitution. They're both living in that same small apartment, paying their own rent every month like actual responsible adults. Brittany dropped out of community college after 1 semester, which honestly surprised no one who had been paying attention to her track record. She now works retail and shares an apartment with 3 roommates, which is probably the first time in her life she's had to split expenses with other people. According to her Instagram posts, she's dating some guy who plays in a local band, and she still occasionally posts cryptic messages about toxic family members that get fewer likes each time she publishes them. My parents occasionally send carefully worded messages, birthday wishes, holiday greetings, that always include subtle hints about reconciliation that I completely ignore. Uncle Daniel keeps me updated on their situation, more out of courtesy than because I actively ask for information. My dad apparently still complains about his job regularly, but he shows up every day and collects his paycheck. My mom has joined some church group that's supposedly helping her heal from what she calls family trauma, which is absolutely rich, considering she was the one inflicting most of that trauma. Last month, my mom sent me a text message that said, "We're having a small family dinner next weekend, and everyone would love to see you." I didn't respond, just like I haven't responded to any of their attempts at reconciliation. 2 days later, Brittany tried her own approach. "Mom's really making an effort with this dinner invitation. You could at least show up and give her a chance." I blocked her number immediately. I didn't need that kind of manipulation back in my life. My life is finally completely my own. I'm 29 years old with a thriving business, an incredible relationship with Diana, and genuine financial security for the first time in my adult life. Most guys my age are still figuring out their basic career direction and living paycheck to paycheck. I just had to take the long way around, learning some expensive lessons about family boundaries and financial manipulation along the way. I decided to look into my business finances last week, and the numbers were even better than I had hoped. Since cutting off my parents completely, my income has increased by approximately 70%. This isn't just because I'm no longer hemorrhaging $1,950 every month. It's because I finally had the financial freedom to invest in my business properly, hire good people, and take on larger clients that require more resources up front. My stress levels have absolutely plummeted, and Diana and I just put a deposit down on a vacation property, a small cabin on a lake about 3 hours from the city where we can escape on weekends. The marketing studio is growing faster than I ever expected it would. We just landed a contract with a mid-sized tech company that could potentially double our revenue this year if we execute it properly. I've hired 2 additional consultants and a dedicated account manager, which means I can finally focus on strategy and business development instead of being buried in day-to-day client work. For the first time since college, I feel like I'm building something sustainable rather than just surviving. Last week, I got a letter in the mail, actual physical mail, which was unusual enough to catch my attention immediately. It was from my dad, handwritten on plain notebook paper. "Son," it began, "I know I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you after how we treated you, but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've built with your business. Your mother doesn't know I'm writing this letter. She still thinks you'll eventually come around and things will somehow go back to how they used to be." The letter continued. "I know better than that now. I can see the man you've become despite us, not because of us. What we did was wrong, and I'm genuinely sorry for all of it." It was signed simply Dad in his familiar handwriting that I remembered from birthday cards when I was younger. I read that letter twice, carefully considering every word, then folded it and put it in my desk drawer. No response was needed or expected. It didn't change anything about our relationship or my decision to maintain no contact. It was just a footnote, an acknowledgement of reality that came far too late to matter. But I kept it anyway, maybe as a reminder of how far I've come or how much my life has improved since I stopped allowing them to control it. Every morning when they wake up in that tiny 2-bedroom apartment, having to clock into jobs they probably think are beneath them, they're reminded of what they threw away. They had a son who was willing to sacrifice his own financial future to help them through what should have been a temporary crisis. Instead of appreciating that sacrifice or working toward independence, they treated me like a permanent solution to their problems and got angry when I suggested any kind of change. Meanwhile, I wake up every morning in a home I own, next to a woman who supports my ambitions, running a business that I built from nothing despite their constant discouragement. Diana and I are planning our Costa Rica wedding for next spring, and we're genuinely excited about building a life together that's completely free from the toxic dynamics I grew up with. The irony isn't lost on me that my parents spent my entire childhood telling me that marketing and advertising wouldn't pay the bills, while I was literally paying their bills with my marketing income for 5 years. They called my career a hobby right up until the moment that hobby stopped funding their lifestyle. Now they're both working jobs they consider beneath them, while the son whose career they never respected is thriving in ways they probably never imagined possible. I don't hate them. Honestly, I barely think about them anymore unless someone asks or I get one of their occasional attempts at reconciliation. I just feel nothing, which is probably the healthiest outcome after years of guilt, frustration, and financial manipulation. They made their choices, I made mine, and we're all living with the consequences. The difference is that my consequences include financial freedom, professional success, and a healthy relationship, while theirs include working retail jobs and splitting a 2-bedroom apartment at ages 58 and 54. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting them off so completely, or if I think I was too harsh in my ultimatum. My answer is always the same. I gave them 5 years of my financial life and got nothing but criticism and entitlement in return. When I finally asked for a temporary adjustment, not even to stop helping them entirely, they told me not to come around anymore. They made that choice for me, and I simply honored their request both literally and financially.